Welcome to the Kind Heartfulness podcast, exploring the inner reaches of the heart and mind, brought to you by Germany-Austria, Germany-Austria, and your host, Erric Solomon.
Welcome to the Kind Heartfulness podcast. And today's episode is about reincarnation, rebirth, and the Buddha's awakening, and my guest is Andreas Doctor. He got his PhD in 2004 from the University of Calgary, and he lives with his family in a small village in Denmark. He's been involved in translating and editing for the 84,000 project since the very early days and is currently serving as editorial director. For a number of years, Andreas has studied Buddhist history and philosophy under the guidance of Tibetan monks and lamas, mostly in Nepal at Kanning Shedra Bling Monastery. As a founding member of Rangjung Yeshe Institute, he spent 15 years teaching at the Institute, and for most of this period, he served as Director of Studies at Kathmandu University's Center for Buddhist Studies, located at the Rangjung Yeshe Institute in Bodhanath, Nepal. Andreas is the director of Dhammachakra Translation Committee, where he's participated in numerous translation projects, and most recently in the translation of sutras and tantras from the Tibetan canon. He's also a founding member of Rangjung Yeshe Gomde in Denmark, a sister center of study and practice to the center in Austria, which is the, you can say, kind benefactor of this podcast. So Andreas is part of our extended family. And actually, Andreas warned me before our conversation that he just had a few ideas about the subject of rebirth and how we might talk about it. But he said it's just going to be a big experiment, and maybe it won't be any good. Well, I can promise you today's episode is really good, and we end up in a couple of very surprising places. So let's get right to it. Andreas Doctor, welcome to the Kind Heartfulness podcast. So nice to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me.
So let's start by talking a little bit about your work with the 84,000 project and how that relates to our topic today.
Yeah, thanks. I'm working at 84,000, translating the words of the Buddha, which is a project to translate the entire Tibetan canon into English and to make it available for free download on the internet. And we have started with a 25-year project to translate what the Tibetans call the Kanjur, which is the translated teachings of the Buddha. And altogether, it's a project that spans 70,000 Tibetan pages. So it's quite a large project.
Yeah.
And right now we are halfway through that. So we have still 12 years to go. We've been working on it for the last 13 years.
And your role in that is?
Currently, I'm the editorial director. So I'm working with the translators. We have a team of translators and editors on scheduling the project, assigning texts, working with the drafts that come in, and making sure that they get published. So that's my work now. Previously, I was working as a translator and editor also.
That sounds like something like herding cats. I mean, how do you deal with all the different traditions of translation, shall we say?
Yeah, well, we have many learned practitioners who've been contributing translations, and it's been a great joy really to work with so many diverse, but also very interesting and thoughtful translators. And You would think that it would be very difficult, but my experience has been that we have been pretty good at creating consensus around many important terms, and sometimes there's also value in having diversity. It brings, different perspectives on terminology and the concepts behind that term. So it's very interesting, and but overall it's been enjoyable, because you see the beauty of this project is that almost all translators and editors are scholars and practitioners. So everyone is there for the purpose of serving the Buddhist tradition by making these teachings available. So that makes a big difference in how we work together.
Wow, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, that is a very very interesting thing to be spending our time on, and the teachings that come out that we translate, the texts are fantastic, and every time we work on a text, we are just so amazed at the profundity and the variety of the teachings that we encounter, and many of them are being presented now for the first time in English. It's a great joy to kind of make those teachings available now.
And I think that the thing that struck me as really important about this project is the fact that the Tibetan, the language, the kind of Tibetan language that's used to express this, there's a real possibility that there'll be very few people who will even understand it in a generation or two. And now we have people who both understand that and understand English well enough. And as you say, they're practitioners and so forth, that this is actually an amazing project of preservation.
Yes, it is. And it seems like the many conditions came together just at the right time. And it's not easy. The Tibetan as a language is being basically defunded by universities whenever they get the chance. So there are less and less places where you can study classical Tibetan compared to just a few years ago. And that's a great shame.
Why is that? I mean, seeing as so much of the Buddhist literature is preserved in Tibetan and nowhere else.
Yes. But increasingly, it's been my experience that universities want to fund studies that are sort of immediately applicable in a commercial setting, where people are supposed to leave with a guarantee of having a job. And the Buddhist tradition has never been one where you would study with that in mind. So apart from a few tenured professors, there has never been great sort of job security in taking these teachings and in studying classical languages and the Buddhist teachings. So I think that's the reason behind it, which unfortunately, of course, unfortunately is a very sad development, but it seems to be the case.
I think it's affecting all kinds of disciplines in areas we used to call the humanities. I'm not sure if that's a technical term.
Yes, definitely.
Tibetan. Okay, so this could be a whole episode in itself, and maybe we can delve into it another time, but we were going to talk about rebirth and how your research has led you to understand the meaning of rebirth.
Yes. Well, yeah, and I should say, in my experience, what I think of Buddhism is always a snapshot. I've been studying Buddhism now for a little over 30 years, and when I think back, there has never been really kind of my understanding, and what I think about Buddhism is always a work in progress. And what I think about rebirth today, is based on the text that I've been fortunate to read, and the teachings that I've been hearing from people like Chökyi, and it's the beauty of studying Buddhism to me is that the more you study, the more you discover there is to know. And the Dharma is truly like an ocean. So I would like to say, I'm not speaking about the topic of rebirth in any kind of as any kind of authority. It's simply what I happen to think at the moment. But I think it's nevertheless, something that is interesting for all of us to consider, because on the one hand, it's one of the basic premises for the Buddhist tradition that we as individuals are stuck in an unfortunate round of rebirths that are kind of mired in all kinds of unhappy states. And so rebirth is a sort of key tenet to Buddhism. It's one of the problems that the Buddha set out to solve. And he, in his first teaching, talked about suffering, how we can overcome suffering by following the path, and thereby put an end to that unfortunate circumstance. So from the very early teachings of the Buddha, it was the idea that one is in caught in samsara is present and is one of the keystones in the Buddhist teaching. So I think we would have to, as Buddhists, we would have to accept that there are past and future lives. At least that is what the teachings ask us to adopt that view. Now, there are also other ways of looking at this, and one of the beauty of the Buddhist tradition is that there are traditionally said to be 84,000 teachings that the Buddha gave to overcome ignorance and suffering. And not all of these teachings match exactly when you put them up against each other. There are ways of reconciling the differences in the teachings, but when you look at them on the surface, there are teachings that prescribe different viewpoints for different people. Mm-hmm. So the Mahayana Sutras, they of course function within a worldview in which there is a rebirth, but there are also, I discovered, very important teachers in the Mahayana Sutras who have a different take on rebirth, where basically the past life and the future life do not exist. And why is it that they do not exist? It is because the present life doesn't exist either.
I think one thing that might be helpful here is for me to give a little bit of background why I think we're having this discussion, and I'll just talk about it, if you don't mind, personally, which is when I started in studying Buddhism, my family, we always believed, I would say, in past and future lives. Just growing up, that was in my family. We talked that way.
Yeah.
And so then, of course, as a teenager, stumbled upon this Buddhist idea of, well, there's no personal self that to be found. So then what is it? When you start studying Buddhism, they're talking about past and future lives, but there's no personal self to be found. So what is it then that is going from life to life? And here I'm choosing the word rebirth rather than reincarnation. I don't know if that was okay, but I started with rebirth.
Yes.
Because I think reincarnation has this more of this sense of there's a thing that's going from life to life and rebirth is more just like there's a continuum of activity. That's how I think of it anyway. But and then I have to say, as a Buddhist practitioner and someone who's made at least some small attempt to study and practice, and my own understanding of what what is the meaning of rebirth, and what is it, and what is there a thing that's reborn has changed and keeps changing.
Yes.
And I think that's a little bit why you started with this conversation by saying you're not an expert and this is your understanding today. It's a little bit capturing that flavor of our own way of thinking or relating to it evolves as we study and practice. So I think that's the thing that every practitioner kind of faces is, well, there seems to be some notion of past and future lives in most of the teachings, although, as you point out, there's some places where that's sort of blown up. So then what is it? What do we do? What is meant by rebirth? And how does that relate to us as practitioners? How does that inform my practice?
Yeah.
Did I get that sort of right in the right ballpark?
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Because, one way of looking at it is when we think of rebirth, then we tend to take ourselves, current selves, as the starting point. But just as we think of ourselves being reborn,
Yes.
by that same logic, there would have been someone in the past life who thought of, them being reborn as us.
Yes.
So that then begs the question: are we now the future life of the present, of the past, us, or not? We tend to think of ourselves as the way we are now. We don't think of ourselves as the future existence of the past existence, right?
Sure.
And so presumably in our next life there will be a being that thinks of their existence in as that existence, and not that they will not think of it as the future existence of us. So from that perspective, I would say, in the current form that we have, that it's limited to this life. But that, as you say, doesn't necessarily prevent our mind from taking rebirth, but it will invariably be in a different form, with different concepts in different circumstances. So, and unless we become highly developed practitioners, there will be no memory of this life. There will perhaps be imprints in the mind that give shape to that existence, but for most people, the memory is not there.
That's true.
So what that points to is that you mentioned that there's a lack of self already in the current life, according to Buddhist philosophy, and if we take that teaching serious, and there's no reason why we shouldn't, then even our current life can be deconstructed, and you can come to the understanding that there is no in a lasting entity that exists from the time we are born until we die.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant state of flux where everything is changing,
Mm-hmm.
and by the time we die, the person who was born, honestly, what is there to connect those two, even in relative terms?
Mm-hmm.
It's not clear what that would be.
Mm-hmm.
So to think of past and future lives in a kind of in a rigid way of me being born and living again is, I think, missing the point that already now that is not the case. This is, it's something that all Buddhist traditions point that out. But I can say for myself, I tend to forget that. And then
Yes.
when I
I think
forget
that's
that,
our problem.
yeah, exactly. So when I forget that, then I begin to think of past and future lives in this kind of slightly materialistic and simple way of, me existing now, being reborn and continuing to kind of exist. And I think that is the I can say for myself, I think that's the wrong way of looking at this issue.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think the part that's difficult for myself, why do I keep forgetting? It's because I have memories, and those memories have some resonance that creates this, there's a me there, right? Because I can remember what it was like to be a child, and I have this sense of going through different stages, and there was, there's some kind of growth and all this, but still there's still some kind of basic observer or something that seems to be continuing through it all. And I wonder how much of it is by just simply grasping at memories that we create this construct of that there's something there that's
Yes.
continuing.
That seems to be the problem, that we grasp onto this. Many of the Mahayana teachings are, in fact, going to great length in describing how to overcome that. And that, for me, has been one of the great experiences of reading the Mahayana sutras that are now being translated and published. To read these quite radical teachings on how to bring the experience of the lack of self, of the lack of an individual, into daily life, you could say. There are many stories, the Mahayana sutras, and I should mention that there are in the Kanjur, there are several hundred sutras that teach on a variety of topics. This topic comes up fairly frequently, and there's a couple of stories that sort of have stuck in my mind as really good examples of that. One is the Bodhisattva Manjushri. He appears a number of places in the sutras, and very often he is giving very pointed teachings on the lack of self to those who listen to him. And he does it sometimes accompanied by a variety of miracles, but also he is also often very determined to push the point of egolessness or selflessness or lack of self. And one of the, I think, quite fascinating stories is the teaching of that he gives to a king called Ajatashatru, who was the king of Magadha, which was the central, the largest kingdom in northern India at the time of the Buddha. And he had ascended to the throne by killing his own father, King Bimbisara, in quite terrible ways. He had imprisoned and tortured him and starved him, and that's kind of how he became king. So later on, he came in contact with the teachings of the Buddha and developed intense regret and remorse. And in one of the sutras, he goes to see the Buddha, and Manjushri is there also, and he says, I will do anything. Tell me exactly, just anything. I will do it to overcome what I have done. And Manjushri says, I'm very sorry, but no Buddha and no Bodhisattva can ever help you with this. And when he hears that, he's so saddened that he faints, falls to the ground. When he then awakens, he asks, how is that possible? How can no one help me? And Manjushri says, it's because only by realizing the lack of self in you and the thoughts that you have are you able to overcome that. Both overcome the negative consequence of what you have done and the remorse itself. And Manjushri gives him some very beautiful teachings on the lack of self, lack of an individual. And Ajatashatru realizes then the meaning of that teaching, and eventually gains quite high level of insight. And so Manjushri teaches in this way, points out that the way to gain experience in Buddhism is through applying the teachings to your own mind, and not by some external power blessing you and somehow bringing you a great boon in that way.
So then this begs the question, so what does all this rebirth mean?
Yeah, that is the I think that one traditional way of talking about this dilemma or dichotomy is that in terms of relative and ultimate. But and you can think of it relatively. We seemingly take rebirth. Ultimately, we don't. But you could also make the argument, as does Manjushri, that even in relative terms, currently the self is not there. And this is a big topic, and this is something I think that sort of invites for personal reflection and also for study, really, to hear what other people, other scholars in the past, Buddhist scholars, have thought on this.
What do you think, for someone who's listening to the podcast and might be interested in pursuing this, where would you point them? Is there a place, or do we have to wait until the 84,000 project is?
No, I mean, now this podcast is hosted through Rangjung Yeshe Gomde in Austria.
Yes.
And I would say, Chuginima, who's the spiritual head and founder of Gomde in Austria and all the other Gomde centers, has always been a great proponent of education and study. And many of his Dharma centers, the Gomde centers and the Rangjung Yeshe Institute in Kathmandu, offer, study programs for exactly this type of topic. And if I would say, if we really want to sort of engage seriously with these topics, then that's an excellent way to do so. There are study programs that present classical philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, that deals with these kinds of issues. So that would be my my advice. But in general, just reading on the about Buddhism and trying to kind of educate ourselves on this is very rewarding.
Okay, now I'm going to just ask it a slightly different way because I agree. You just gave terrific advice. I find no flaw in it. However, I think
Yes.
many people in our audience are kind of urban yogis with full-time jobs and family
Yes.
responsibilities. So is there something we could point them to, or is it maybe just by continuing to go to see their teacher and put the teachings into practice, or is there something
Yeah.
else? Yeah.
I think for those who are in that situation, those of us who are like that,
Mm.
I think the and this is just my experience, the advice of the teacher in when we go to seminars and meet with our teacher is almost always the circumstance that makes it possible for us to see these points in new light that would have been very difficult otherwise, or required many years of study, because the knowledge and the insight that they communicate somehow makes these kinds of connections, hidden connections, visible. And can I give one example?
Oh, I wish you would. Thank you.
Um,
It's a very vital topic you're raising.
yeah, I over the last year and a half,
Mm.
Chugyamimamche has been teaching a number of times on the first statement that the Buddha made after he gained awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And I had read that a number of times before Rinpoche began to teach on it.
Yes.
And I had, one way of understanding it.
Mm-hmm.
But hearing Chugyamimamche's oral advice on this very short statement has, opened up the whole topic, and each word in that brief statement that the Buddha made has become has gained a whole new meaning.
Would you
So
mind sharing the statement? I mean, I know
yeah,
what you're talking
yes,
about. I think I
it's
was.
so just after the Buddha gained awakening, he was sitting in the jungle
Yeah.
in Gaya,
Yeah.
and he was sitting silently in the forest. And then at one point he made a statement. He said to himself, he said, "Profound, peaceful, simple, lucid, and unconditioned. Such is the nectar-like truth I have realized. Were I to teach it, no one would understand, so I will remain silently in the forest." So it's the first five words: profound, peaceful, simple, lucid, unconditioned. Those are the key terms that describe the Buddha's awakening. And in Chugyamimamche's explanation, profound refers to the profound insight into lack of personal self, or in both in a person and in other phenomena as well.
Mm.
Peaceful refer to the teachings on non-violence and compassion. Stainless or simple, and when you begin to study these Buddhist texts, each word can become a gateway to more study. And here the word simple has is a translation of from Sanskrit that is actually means stainless. So there are two manuscript traditions in Tibetan, one that says stainless, one that says simple. And in Rinpoche's explanation, they refer to the same thing, both stainless and simple. Or you could also say another translation of simple would be free from mental constructs. What that teaching in Rinpoche's explanation refers to is the teachings of the Madhyamaka, the middle way, that point out the path free from any kind of conceptual constructs. Then the last two words, lucid and unconditioned, in Rinpoche's teachings refer to the Vajra vehicle. And so the teachings on, or the explanations of those two terms should be given by someone who's a qualified Vajrayana teacher. But the last word of these two, unconditioned, can also be seen in a sutra context. So if you don't mind, Erric, I would like to just say one word about that last word, the unconditioned.
Please.
I think it's is that okay?
Yes. This is really.
So this is from a sutra point of view that I'm talking.
Mm.
This word is something is a very key concept in Buddhism, and it's opposed to the conditioned. So all the entire world is divided in either conditioned or unconditioned. And the Buddha uses unconditioned to describe his awakening. And the definition of the unconditioned is that which has never come into being, that which has never existed, and that which never will come into being. So the Buddha describes his own awakening in those terms. And there are different ways of listing the phenomena or the things, so to speak, that are unconditioned, according to the different traditions of Buddhism. But one way of looking at the conditioned is to say it refers to space. Space is an unconditioned phenomenon. And the other one is the awakening of a Buddha, which is also suchness. And suchness is a technical term. It refers to the way things are. So the real way things are, space, and the Buddha's awakening are all unconditioned phenomena. And when I think of the awakening of the Buddha and the way things are being unconditioned like space, it means that they are present everywhere. And that means that what we as practitioners are trying to realize and trying to gain is something that's already present everywhere. And for me, I can say this has been, an interesting notion, because it also means that we are saturated already by that which we are trying to gain.
Yes.
and that, and this is from this is from a purely sutra perspective.
This is important.
Yeah. So if we take that statement serious, it has big implications for how we think of ourselves as practitioners and our practice and what we are trying to achieve.
Yes.
So
It's really beautiful. It's the whole thing is kind of like a pointing out instruction, just the first thing that Buddha says, honestly,
Yes, it
right?
that is the fascinating
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
that you know, and you can read it on your own, and and for me it was only when I heard Rinpoche give these explanations that take each word
yeah,
serious,
yeah,
and and presents it from his from the point of view of a very great practitioner, that uh, this began to kind of open up for me.
yes. I can understand. I
Yeah.
think this, um, it's a little embarrassing because we're in one level, two students of Chugigim Rinpoche, and we're going to talk about how extraordinary he is, and it just sounds like people just bragging about their own teacher. But um, there are other teachers who are also extraordinary, and this isn't saying any kind of sectarian thing, but my experience of a few times in my life, I've been privileged enough to meet these kind of masters, practitioners who realization is so uh, complete that it's not just what they say, but it's somehow being there when they say it that
Yes.
makes it's like all that study you did. The benefit is it's like somebody just threw gasoline and the match, and it just blazes all of a sudden. You had no idea that this was coming, and now it does. And we're very fortunate that there are still masters like Chikini Rinpoche here in this world,
Yeah.
and that people can meet them.
Yes. And what I that's absolutely right. That is the great catalyst for you know the teachings opening up.
Mm.
And but that when you then look back at the teachings, you can see how um, this will have been an ongoing experience through the Buddhist tradition, from each generation will have had this uh, understanding, and that the understanding is somehow lying there in the teachings for us to discover. uh, and yeah, so this is one thing that I find extremely rewarding, also of that combination of getting oral teachings and then looking at
Yeah.
the classical text at the same time.
Well, I'm really grateful that you shared that with us today. I think that um, one of the things that you can say is, I mean, why did Buddha have to then give all these other teachings, or why are there all these other teachings? Because it's this idea that you have everything already, that's already present, it suffuses everything, is so hard to believe. And because so much of our normal existence is so contrary to that very notion that we it's like we it's almost like you hear that kind of a teaching from the very beginning, and it doesn't make any sense, and then gradually, because you there are a whole bunch of teachings for those of us normal people who don't believe we really have everything we need, but then it keeps coming up again and again and again, and then all of a sudden your teacher will read these lines of the Buddha again to you, and then suddenly it all clicks and begins to make sense. And it's a whole interesting subject why it is we have so little confidence in such
Yeah.
a very simple and profound and direct statement.
Yes. I think um, I think there's part of it is perhaps the human condition. Part
Mhm.
of it is also maybe our cultural conditioning. Um,
How do you mean that?
um, of course, there's many ways of my background is I grew up in a Christian society, and of course there are different ways within Christianity also of looking at the individual in relation to God. But in how I understood Christianity, there was a separation between the individual and God, and it's hard to know how that might also influence us. And there are probably many other cultural
well, I mean, you even see this kind of in deity yoga, where the outer tantras there's you, and there's this great deity in the sky, and you're dirty and they're clean, and then gradually you progress, and then you can just be the deity from the very beginning, and I think that Buddhists I think it's true what you're saying about it could be cultural and something prevalent in our society today. But I suspect this has always been a tendency that humans have to think that I'm just no good.
Yeah.
And there's some higher power that's the good thing. And that's to come back to the story you told earlier about this from the sutra, where it's kind of up to us. We have, it's all within us. There's no, boon from the great God that's going to come to us through prayer. Eventually, it's just going to resolve. Although that may be helpful. Eventually, it's still going to come up to be all up to us.
Yeah, it's all very interesting, and like I said, my view on all of this is definitely a work in progress, but I do find it extremely interesting to think about, and yeah, I'm very happy, Eric, that we could
this conversation was
meet and discuss.
And Andreas, the only thing I feel sad about is I feel like we could have made 5 podcasts. So I at least want to ask you to come back and let's make one more together.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we just scratched the surface. It's been a really important conversation, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah. No, I'm always happy to discuss this. It's yeah, definitely. And thank you for hosting this podcast. It's a wonderful initiative. I always look forward to hearing your interviews.
Oh, thank you so much. As long as Chicken Rinpoche doesn't mind, I suspect I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, please do.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you also for all your hard work on this incredible project, the 84,000. And I know there's so many other people, but we have you today, so I want to just say personally thank you. I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. It's as you say, it's a big team effort, and everybody's working very hard. But we're so happy to see all these texts are now being published, and people can read them for free at the 84,000 website. So check it out.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, we like to invite you to continue the journey into the heart of enlightened mind at gomde.eu.